It's a big question thinking about building a shield for Earth, like a really big question. It sounds like something from a movie, right? A giant umbrella in space protecting us. But people actually think about this. Scientists and engineers, they kick around these ideas. They have to because our planet is changing, and the sun, well, it's always there, sending us light and heat. Mostly good things, but sometimes a bit too much. Or sometimes it gets cranky. So, why would we even want to build a shield? What's the problem we're trying to solve? There are a few main reasons that come up. The biggest one, the one everyone talks about, is climate change. Earth is getting warmer. We know this. Gases we put into the air trap heat. It's like wrapping our planet in an extra blanket. The sun sends us energy, and normally some of that energy bounces back into space. But with more greenhouse gases, less heat escapes. So a shield, if we could build one, would try to do something else. It would try to stop some of that sunlight from even reaching Earth in the first place. It would reflect some of the sun's energy back out before it even gets into our atmosphere. This could cool things down. That's the main idea for climate change. But the sun isn't just about steady warmth. It's also a powerful star, and sometimes it acts up. It can spit out huge amounts of energy in particles. These are called solar flares or coronal mass ejections. Think of them as giant burps from the sun. When these burps hit Earth, they can cause problems. They can mess up our satellites, the ones we use for GPS and communication. They can overload our power grids, causing blackouts. A strong enough solar storm could really knock us back, technologically speaking. So, another reason for a shield could be to protect us from these solar storms. Not just the heat, but the harmful radiation and charged particles. It's a different kind of protection, but still important. And then there's the really, really long-term view. Billions of years from now, the sun will get hotter. It will expand. Eventually, it will swallow Earth. Now, that's so far in the future it's hard to even imagine, but some people think about how humanity might survive that. A shield, or even moving Earth, becomes part of that thinking. For now, though, let's stick to the problems we might face in the next few centuries. Climate change and solar storms are the more immediate drivers for these big shield ideas. So, if we wanted to build a shield, what would it look like? Like, this is where it gets really interesting and really hard. Most of the ideas involve putting something in space. Because to block or reflect a lot of sunlight, you need to do it before the light hits our atmosphere. One popular idea is a giant parasol. Imagine a huge sunshade floating out between Earth and the sun. It would be massive, like unbelievably massive. Think of it as a giant, very thin mirror reflector. It would need to be very light, so it's not too hard to get into space, and it would need to be very reflective. It would sit at a special spot called a Lagrange point. You don't need to know all the physics, but basically a Lagrange point is a place in space where the gravity from Earth and the sun balances out. A shield placed there would stay in a pretty stable position. The most talked about spot is L1, which is about 1,000,000 miles towards the sun from Earth. That's a long way out. This parasol wouldn't be a solid sheet. It might be made of millions or even billions of smaller mirrors. Like a swarm of tiny spacecraft, each one acting as a mini shield. They could all work together, reflecting a tiny bit of sunlight. Or it could be a single, vast structure, unfolded like a massive umbrella. The material would have to be super thin, maybe thinner than plastic wrap, and it would need to handle the harshness of space. It gets bombarded by tiny dust particles, radiation, all sorts of things. It also has to be something that doesn't just degrade over time. Another idea is to launch a cloud of dust into space. Not just any dust, very fine, reflective dust. This dust would also be placed at the L1 point. It would spread out and form a diffuse cloud that blocks some sunlight. This sounds simpler, maybe. No need for a giant structure, but how do you launch enough dust, and how do you keep it there? Dust tends to spread out and drift away. You'd need to constantly replenish it. And how do you make sure it doesn't accidentally become space junk that causes problems for our satellites? These are all space-based ideas. There are other ideas that are more earthbound, often called geoengineering. Things like spraying tiny reflective particles into the atmosphere, making clouds brighter, or painting roofs white. These also aim to reflect sunlight, but they're not a shield in the same way. A space shield offers a more direct, perhaps more controlled, way to adjust the amount of sunlight reaching Earth. So you can turn it up, turn it down. With atmospheric stuff, it's harder to control and has more immediate, complex effects on weather systems. For this discussion, we're mostly thinking about something big out in space. So, okay, we've got the idea. A giant space shield. Now, let's be real. The engineering challenges are mind-boggling. They're enormous. First, size and scale. Earth is big. The sun is even bigger. The amount of sunlight hitting Earth is vast. To make a meaningful difference in global temperatures, a shield would have to be incredibly large. We're talking millions of square miles. Imagine building something the size of a small country, or even bigger, and putting it in space. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. Even if it's super thin, the sheer area is staggering. We simply do not have the ability to build something like that right now. Then there are the materials. What do you make this shield out of? It has to be strong enough to hold together, light enough to launch, and reflective enough to do the job. It needs to last a very long time in space. Space is a vacuum, but it's also full of radiation. It's cold in the shade, hot in the sun, and there are micrometeoroids, tiny bits of rock and dust zipping around at incredible speeds. Even a speck can cause damage. The material would need to be self-healing, or extremely durable, or constantly repaired. And we'd need a lot of it. Where would we get all that material? We'd have to mine it, process it, and then launch it. And that brings us to launching and construction. Getting anything into space is expensive. Very, very expensive. And heavy things are even more expensive. We're talking about millions of tons of material potentially. Our current rockets are powerful, but they are not designed for that kind of mass. We would need a whole new way to launch things. Maybe reusable rockets that are much bigger, or some kind of space elevator, though that's another sci-fi idea. Even if we could get the material up there, how do you build something so big in space? Humans can do some construction in space, but it's slow and risky. We need incredibly advanced robots working autonomously. Assemble intricate structures with a lot of different sources of resources, so far from Earth. This is a monumental undertaking, unlike anything we've ever tried. Once it's built, how do you control it? It needs to stay in the right place, precisely positioned between Earth and the Sun. Small nudges would be needed constantly to counteract gravitational forces and solar wind pressure. And what if we want to adjust the amount of sunlight, make it reflect a bit more or a bit less? The shield would need mechanisms to do that. Maybe it could tilt or open and close like blinds. All of this adds to the complexity. And what if it breaks? A piece falls off or a large chunk of it gets damaged. It's not like you can just send up a repair crew easily. We'd need robust maintenance systems, probably automated. And then there's the cost. This would be the most expensive project humanity has ever conceived. By orders of magnitude. We're talking trillions, maybe tens of trillions of dollars. Who pays for it? How do you get every country in the world to agree to fund something so massive with such huge risks and potential rewards? It's a global project, but global agreement on anything so complex is incredibly hard to get. The money we'd spend on this project could also be spent on other things, like building renewable energy sources or lifting people out of poverty. It's a huge choice. Okay, so the technical hurdles are immense, but let's say for a moment that we figure out how to build it. We launch it, we assemble it, it's sitting there, perfectly positioned. Now we face the real tough questions. The unintended consequences, the ethical dilemmas. Changing Earth's climate on purpose is a huge gamble. Our planet's climate system is incredibly complex. It's not just about temperature. It's about rainfall, wind patterns, ocean currents, cloud formation. If you reduce the amount of sunlight reaching Earth, you're not just turning down a thermostat. You are fundamentally altering the energy balance of the entire planet. We don't fully understand all the interconnected parts. What if cooling one part of the world causes devastating droughts in another? What if it shifts storm tracks, leading to more intense hurricanes or typhoons in new places? Some regions might benefit, others might suffer greatly. How do we decide who wins and who loses? Who gets to make that decision? There's also something called termination shock. This is a big concern. If we build a shield and start cooling Earth, we become dependent on it. What if, for some reason, we have to stop? Maybe the shield breaks down and we can't fix it. Maybe a future generation decides it's too expensive to maintain. If we suddenly stop the cooling, Earth would warm up very, very quickly. Much faster than it would if we just let nature take its course. This rapid warming could be even more catastrophic than the gradual warming we're seeing now. Ecosystems would not have time to adapt. So, once we start this, we might be committed to it forever. It's a one-way street. Then there's the politics and governance side. Who decides to deploy such a shield? Is it one powerful nation, a group of nations, or does the entire world have to agree? What if some countries believe it will harm them? What if it's used as a weapon or a tool for control? Imagine one country having the power to change the global climate. This project would require unprecedented international cooperation, trust, and a global framework for decision-making that we just don't have right now. It could easily lead to conflict. And let's not forget the ecological impacts. Plants need sunlight to grow. This process is called photosynthesis. If you reduce the amount of sunlight, even a little, how does that affect crops? Forests, the tiny plankton in the ocean that form the base of the marine food web? Less sunlight could mean less food for everything. What about the quality of light? Sunlight is also important for things like vitamin D production in humans. We would need to understand exactly how much light is just right for the entire planet, and that's a very hard thing to figure out. It's a careful balance that nature has found over billions of years. Messing with that balance could have unforeseen consequences for life itself. So, when we talk about a shield, it's not just a technical problem, it's a societal, ethical, and political problem of the highest order. Given all these challenges and risks, what are the alternatives? Because we do have other ways to deal with climate change. The most straightforward and widely accepted approach is to reduce our emissions. Yes. This means stopping the release of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, switching from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, making our homes and cars more energy efficient, changing how we farm and manage land. This is tackling the problem at its source. It's about turning off the tap rather than trying to bail out the bathtub with a giant shield. Many people see a space shield as a distraction or a bond aid solution that lets us avoid the harder work of changing our energy systems and lifestyles. Another alternative is carbon capture. This involves developing technologies to remove carbon dioxide directly from the air or from power plant emissions. It's like a giant vacuum cleaner for CO2. This is also a form of geoengineering, but it aims to fix the cause of warming too much CO2 rather than just masking the symptom too much heat from the sun. It's still very expensive and complex, but perhaps less risky than directly messing with incoming sunlight. And then there's adaptation. This means learning to live with a warmer world, building seawalls to protect coastal cities, developing crops that can withstand droughts or new pests, moving populations away from areas that become uninhabitable. This doesn't solve the problem, but it helps us cope with the changes that are already happening or are unavoidable. So, where does that leave us with the idea of a shield for Earth? It's an incredibly compelling idea. It sparks the imagination. It makes us think about what humanity is capable of. The sheer ambition of it is inspiring. But it is also deeply, deeply complex. The technical challenges are monumental, requiring leaps in engineering, materials science, and robotics that we can barely imagine today. The costs would be staggering, demanding resources on a scale that beggars belief. And even if we could build it, the risks are immense. We could trigger new, unexpected climate disasters. We could become dependent on a technology that is impossible to turn off safely. We could create political conflicts on a global scale. We would be playing God with the planet's climate, and we simply do not understand the system well enough to do that responsibly. Most experts agree that building a shield to protect Earth from the sun is currently firmly in the realm of science fiction. It is not a practical solution for our immediate climate crisis. The most practical, safest, and most effective path forward is to tackle the root causes of climate change, reduce our emissions, and transition to a sustainable way of living. However, thinking about these grand ideas is not useless. It pushes the boundaries of our imagination. It makes us consider our place in the universe. It forces us to think about global cooperation and our long-term future. And maybe, just maybe, some of the technologies we might develop in pursuit of such a grand vision could find other, more practical uses. For now, A Shield for Earth remains a thought experiment, a dramatic what if. It's a reminder of the scale of the challenges we face and the incredible ingenuity we would need to overcome them. But also, it's a powerful argument for taking action now, with the tools and knowledge we already have, to protect our home. Because prevention is always better than trying to build a giant umbrella when the storm is already here.